June 2016, 4 in the morning. FBI agents storm a penthouse at the Park Laurel Tower in Manhattan. What they find inside looks like a movie set. Bottles of Cristal champagne stacked like firewood. A $35 million Basquiat painting casually hanging in the bedroom. A Monet in the bathroom. This isn't the home of a tech billionaire. Not old money, not even new money from anything legitimate. This is the penthouse of Joe Low, a 34-year-old Malaysian financier who once spent $100 million gambling in a single weekend in Vegas. A man who threw parties where Paris Hilton was a regular guest, where Leonardo DiCaprio arrived on a $250 million yacht, where Beyoncé performed for private audiences. So where does that kind of money come from? Not from building companies, not from inheritance, not from anything you'd find in a Forbes profile. It came from a sovereign wealth fund designed to lift Malaysia out of poverty. A fund created by the Malaysian government to build schools, power plants, and infrastructure. A fund that was supposed to help millions of people. And Wall Street's most prestigious bank, Goldman Sachs, helped him steal it. $4.5 billion vanished. The biggest kleptocracy case in American history. This is that story. But this story doesn't start in a Manhattan penthouse. It starts 7 years earlier. September 2009, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. A new prime minister takes office with an ambitious vision: transform Malaysia into an economic powerhouse, attract billions in foreign investment, build the infrastructure of a first world nation. The vehicle for this transformation? 1MDB, One Malaysia Development Berhad, a sovereign wealth fund that would change everything. And it did change everything, just not the way anyone expected. Within 3 years, 1MDB would become the vehicle for the largest theft in modern financial history. And it all started with a handshake between a young Malaysian socialite and a Goldman Sachs banker who saw nothing but dollar signs. April 2009. Najib Razak becomes Malaysia's 6th prime minister. This wasn't just another politician taking office. Najib came from political royalty. His father was Malaysia's 2nd prime minister. His cousin was the 3rd. Power in the Razak family was hereditary. But Najib inherited a problem. Malaysia was stuck. Economists called it the middle-income trap. Neither a developing country nor a developed one. Growing, but not fast enough. Modernizing, but always one step behind Singapore. South Korea, Taiwan. Najib's vision? One Malaysia. Unite the country's diverse population, attract global capital, leapfrog into first world status. And in September 2009, he created the vehicle to do it, a 1MDB. On paper, it looked legitimate. The fund partnered with Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, Abar Investments, with PetroSaudi International. Real partnerships, real governments, instant credibility. But there was a fatal flaw in the design. Najib chaired the advisory board. The fund answered only to him. No parliamentary oversight, no independent board, no transparency requirements, concentrated power, minimal accountability, the perfect recipe for corruption. And waiting in the wings was exactly the wrong person to exploit it. Low-Tech Joe. Everyone called him Joe Low. Born November 1981 in Penang, Malaysia. Son of a garment industry businessman, comfortable but not elite. Not the kind of wealth that gets you into rooms with prime ministers, but Low had a skill, networking. He went to Harrow School in London, the same school that educated Winston Churchill. There, he befriended the children of Middle Eastern royalty. At Wharton Business School, he cultivated relationships with the sons and daughters of power. He dropped out of Wharton, didn't need the degree. He was building something more valuable than an MBA, access. By 2010, through family connections and strategic friendships, Low got close to Riza Aziz, Najib Razak's stepson. And here's the thing about Joe Low. He held no government position, no formal role at 1MDB, no official title whatsoever. But by 2010, he was the de facto advisor to the prime minister on 1MDB deals. And Low was already living large. Vegas gambling, bottles of Cristal at nightclubs, courting celebrities, building a persona. But he was doing it on borrowed money, mounting debts. He needed a big score to sustain the lifestyle. 1MDB was that score. The fund needed someone to bring in Gulf Arab investors. Low had those connections. He presented himself as a representative of the Malaysian government to the Arabs, a representative of Saudi royalty to the Malaysians. He was neither, but nobody checked. Meanwhile, 8,000 miles away, Wall Street was desperate. The 2008 financial crisis had devastated the industry's reputation and revenue. Banks needed big deals to prove they were back, to restore investor confidence. And every major bank was hunting for the same limited pool of massive bond issuances. Emerging markets became the gold rush. Sovereign wealth funds in Asia and the Middle East became prime targets. Goldman Sachs had a problem, though. Strong market share in the US and Europe. Weaker in Southeast Asia, the solution? Hire aggressive rainmakers who knew the region. Enter Tim Leissner, German banker, joined Goldman in 2008. By 2011, he was Southeast Asia chairman. Smooth talker, well-connected. Married to fashion designer Kimora Lee Simmons. Working under him, Roger Angkwunger's Malaysian-born Goldman banker. Local connections. Knew how business really worked in the region. And at Goldman, the culture was clear. Eat what you kill. Bonuses rewarded deal volume. The bigger the deal, the bigger the payday. Sovereign wealth funds meant huge bond issuances. Huge bond issuances meant massive fees. Between 2010 and 2011, Lowe and Leissner built a relationship. Dinners, meetings, trust. Lowe's pitch was simple. 1MDB plans to raise $6 billion in bonds over 3 years, once in a career opportunity. Goldman's fee structure for normal bond deals, 1 to 2% of the issuance. Premium deals, if complex, 3 to 5%. 1MDB was offering Goldman whatever they wanted. Red flags were already visible. Lowe had no official title. The fee structure was absurdly high. The timelines were rushed, but Goldman rationalized it away. It's a sovereign fund, backed by the Malaysian government. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. March 2012. Goldman Sachs raises its first bond for 1MDB. $1.75 billion. The official purpose? Fund the energy subsidiary's investments. Power plants, infrastructure projects, economic development. Goldman's fee for the deal? $190 million. Think about that. Nearly 11% of the total issuance. When industry standard is 1 to 2%. The justification? Complex deal. Emerging market risk, premium pricing warranted. And the speed. A normal sovereign bond process takes 6 to 12 months of due diligence, structuring, regulatory approval. This took 6 weeks. Goldman sold the bonds to Middle Eastern sovereign funds, Asian institutional investors. Everyone believed the same thing. Malaysia is a stable country. 1MDB is government-backed. Goldman's reputation means it's safe. And within 72 hours of the bond issuance, $700 million vanished, wired to Swiss bank accounts controlled by Joe Lowe. The money was split between a shell company called Good Star Limited, which Lowe controlled, and accounts designated for Malaysian officials. Here's how clever the scheme was. Good Star looked legitimate. The name was almost identical to 1MDB's actual partner, Abar Investments. The shell company was called Abar Investments PJS Limited. Investors thought the money went to the real Abar. It actually went to Lowe's lookalike company, and the spending began immediately. $20 million for diamond jewelry. Lowe gave it to Australian model Miranda Kerr. She had no idea it was stolen. Years later, the DOJ would seize it from her. $35 million for a Bombardier Global 5000 private jet. $30 million for a Basquiat painting called Dust Heads at a Christie's auction. $10 million gambling at the Venetian Macau. Inside Goldman, a compliance officer sent an email to a colleague. This doesn't smell right. The email was ignored. Tim Leissner pushed the deal through, told compliance the structure had been vetted, told them the Malaysian government approved everything. He was lying. But nobody knew that yet. March 2013, exactly 1 year later, Goldman raises a second bond. Another $1.75 billion. The official purpose? A strategic partnership with Abu Dhabi's Abar Fund for long-term investments. Goldman's fee? Over $200 million. Within days of the issuance, $1.26 billion was diverted. $681 million landed in Prime Minister Najib Razak's personal and bank accounts. Think about that number. $681 million. In his personal checking account, the cover story, it was labeled a donation from the Saudi royal family for political activities. The actual routing looked like this. Bonds sold, money transferred to 1MDB, then moved to a fake Abar company, then split between Lowe, Najib, and other officials. The money was washed through layers. British Virgin Islands, Seychelles, Singapore, Swiss banks. At least 400 shell companies were used across the entire scheme. And Joe Lowe's lifestyle escalated. In a single month, he bought $100 million in art. Monet, Van Gogh, Basquiat. He purchased a $250 million super yacht called Topaz, later renamed Equanimity. $30 million for a penthouse at the Time Warner Center in Manhattan. $39 million for a mansion in Beverly Hills. He'd later sell it to DJ Khaled, who had no idea about its history, but here's where the story gets truly absurd. Lowe decided he wanted to be a Hollywood producer. Through Vegas parties, he'd met Leonardo DiCaprio. They became friends. Lowe saw an opportunity. He financed a movie called The Wolf of Wall Street through a shell company called Red Granite Pictures. The company was owned by Riza Aziz, Najib's stepson. The production budget? $100 million. The source of that money? Stolen 1MDB funds? Let that sink in. A movie about financial fraud, funded by financial fraud. DiCaprio later received gifts from Lowe, a Basquiat painting, Marlon Brando's Oscar statue from On the Waterfront. Years later, DiCaprio would surrender both to authorities. He'd claim he had no idea they were connected to stolen money. He was probably telling the truth. But in 2013, nobody was asking questions. The party was just getting started. Same month as the second bond deal, March 2013, Goldman raised a third bond. $3 billion. In 13 months, Goldman had raised $6.5 billion for 1MDB. Total fees to Goldman? $600 million. Total estimated theft? $4.5 billion, according to the Department of Justice. And the money wasn't just going to Lowe. $1.6 billion in bribes and kickbacks to Malaysian officials. Hundreds of millions to Abu Dhabi officials to look the other way. Even the Goldman bankers got their cut. Leisner personally received over $200 million. Roger Ung got $35 million. This is when Joe Lowe reached peak excess. One night in Vegas, he lost $100 million gambling. One night. For his birthday, Britney Spears performed a private concert. $1 million appearance fee. Bottles of Cristal that cost $250,000 each. On New Year's Eve 2013, Beyoncé performed a private concert for Lowe and his friends. $4 million for one performance. He traveled with an entourage of 50-plus people, rented entire hotel floors, private jets between continents. Paris Hilton was a regular at his parties, Jamie Foxx, Swizz Beatz. Most of them had no idea the money was stolen. Inside Goldman, more warnings were being raised. An email from a compliance officer in March 2013. Why are we doing a third deal when the first two haven't been properly deployed? Leisner's response, client is satisfied, government stands behind it. What emails later revealed, Leisner had forged letters, created fake documents claiming the Malaysian government approved everything, but in 2013 and 2014 the illusion was perfect. Lowe believed he was untouchable. Too big to fail, he thought. Malaysia won't prosecute its own prime minister. Goldman believed they'd followed procedure. Not our job to police sovereign governments. Najib believed he controlled everything. The Attorney General, the police, the courts. But in Kuala Lumpur, a British journalist named Claire Rucastle-Brown was noticing something strange about 1MDB's financial reports. The cracks were forming. February 2015. A blog called Sarawak Report publishes an expose on 1MDB. The author is Claire Rucastle-Brown, a UK-based investigative journalist with sources inside Malaysia. Her reporting reveals something stunning. 1MDB's money trail doesn't lead to investments. It leads to shell companies. The Malaysian government's response is immediate. They block the Sarawak Report website inside Malaysia, call it foreign interference, threaten Brown with legal action. But the story is out. March 2015. The Wall Street Journal drops a bombshell. Reporters Tom Wright and Bradley Hope obtained bank documents. The headline, investigators believe money flowed to Malaysian leader Najib's accounts amid 1MDB probe. $681 million in Najib's personal accounts. Najib's response? It's a political donation from the Saudi royal family. Completely legal, completely normal. Except Malaysia's anti-corruption laws prohibit political donations over $2,500. $681 million is 272,000 times the legal limit. Protests erupt in Kuala Lumpur. Thousands demand Najib resign. Yellow shirts flood the streets. But Najib doubles down. He fires the Attorney General investigating him. Appoints a loyalist. Meanwhile, whistleblowers inside 1MDB are starting to talk. An unnamed executive leaks internal financial documents to Edge Media, a Malaysian news outlet. The documents show billions unaccounted for, financial statements that don't match bank records. In July 2015, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission opens a formal investigation, but there's a cost to speaking out. Kevin Mares, an Australian bank executive preparing to testify about 1MDB transactions, is murdered in July 2015. His body is found in a cement-filled barrel. The message is clear: talking gets you killed. But it's too late. The documents are already with international investigators. At Goldman Sachs headquarters in New York, executives are expressing complete surprise, except internal emails, revealed years later, show compliance officers had warned leadership repeatedly. One email from 2012, the fee structure is unusual and the speed concerning. Another from 2013, we should slow down and ensure proper verification. All ignored. In February 2016, Tim Leisner takes a leave of absence. Quietly, he's fired. Goldman issues a public statement. We relied on representations from officials of 1MDB and the government of Malaysia. Their legal strategy becomes clear: blame the rogue employees. Claim the institution didn't know. But here's the question. Nobody at Goldman wants to answer. How does a rogue employee bypass all internal controls, raise $6.5 billion, and generate $600 million in fees without senior leadership noticing? It's the same playbook from Enron, from the 2008 crisis. Rogue traders, bad actors, never systemic failure. Lloyd Blankfein, Goldman's CEO at the time, would later testify before Congress. I never met Joe Lowe. I didn't know the details of these deals. You're the CEO of the bank. It's the biggest bond deal in Asia that year. Your bank is earning fees 20 times the normal rate. And you don't know? By summer 2015, the walls are closing in. Swiss authorities freeze accounts. Singapore launches investigations. U.S. prosecutors start connecting dots. And Joe Lowe, he's still throwing parties. July 2016. The United States Department of Justice files a civil forfeiture lawsuit. It's the largest action ever taken under the Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative. The target? Over $1 billion in assets purchased with stolen 1MDB funds. The geographic spread is stunning. Seizures in the US, UK, Switzerland, Singapore, Indonesia. August 2016. Swiss authorities freeze accounts linked to 1MDB. $1.2 billion frozen. September 2016. Joe Lowe vanishes. Last confirmed sighting. Macau. After that, nothing. Interpol issues a red notice. He's believed to be in China, either Shanghai or Macau, and China has no extradition treaty with Malaysia or the United States. The hunt is on, but Lowe is out of reach. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, a political earthquake is building. For 60 years, the same coalition had ruled Malaysia. The Barisan Nasional, Najib's party. They'd never lost a federal election. But in 2018, something changed. The 1MDB scandal had turned voters against Najib. The anger was palpable. The opposition, led by 92-year-old former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, ran on a single issue: accountability. May 9th, 2018. Election day. Najib loses. For the first time in 6 decades, his party is out of power. 8 days later, May 17th, police raid Najib's residences. What they find is staggering: $273 million in cash, physically counted bills, stacked in apartments, jewelry, luxury handbags, the kind of wealth you see in movies. July 4th, 2018. Najib is arrested, charged with abuse of power, criminal breach of trust, money laundering. 7 counts related to $10 million from a 1MDB subsidiary. The trial lasts 2 years. July 28th, 2020. Najib is convicted on all 7 counts. The sentence, 12 years in prison, $50 million fine. Najib appeals all the way to Malaysia's highest court. August 23rd, 2022. The final appeal is rejected. Najib Razak, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, begins serving his sentence at Kajang Prison. He's still there today. Across the Pacific, U.S. prosecutors are building cases against the Goldman bankers. August 28th, 2018. Tim Leissner pleads guilty. Conspiracy to launder money. Conspiracy to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. In his plea agreement, Leissner admits everything. He paid $1.6 billion in bribes to Malaysian and Abu Dhabi officials. He personally received over $200 million. And crucially, he agrees to cooperate. To testify against Roger Ng, November 1st, 2018. The DOJ charges Roger Ng and Joe Lowe, in absentia, with money laundering conspiracy. February 2019. Ng is extradited from Malaysia to the United States. His trial begins in February 2022 in a Brooklyn federal courthouse. For 8 days, Tim Leissner sits on the witness stand. He details the entire scheme, implicates Ng at every turn. Ng's defense is simple. Leissner is a liar. I was just following orders. I didn't know it was illegal. The jury doesn't buy it. April 8th, 2022. Roger Ng is convicted on all 3 counts. March 2023, he's sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Leissner's sentencing? Still pending as of 2024, delayed repeatedly because he's cooperating with ongoing investigations. But what about Goldman Sachs itself? October 22nd, 2020. Goldman reaches a historic settlement. The Malaysian subsidiary of Goldman Sachs pleads guilty to violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The penalty breakdown: $2.3 billion to the Department of Justice, $606 million to the SEC and banking regulators. Total U.S. penalties: $2.9 billion. But that's not all. In July 2020, Goldman reached a separate settlement with the Malaysian government. $3.9 billion. Add in legal fees, and the total cost to Goldman Sachs: $6.8 billion. In the settlement, Goldman admits that its subsidiary conspired to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that it failed to detect the bribes. But here's what Goldman did not admit: that senior leadership knew about the fraud. No executives from the C-suite were charged. Not Lloyd Blankfein, not the CFO, not the COO, just Leistner and Ungarn regional bankers, not board members. Goldman's position remains. These were rogue employees who lied to the bank. The question remains, how? By 2024, the DOJ's Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative has recovered over $1.7 billion in assets, and some of those recoveries made headlines. Leonardo DiCaprio surrendered a Basquiat painting called Red Man, valued at $9.2 million. He also returned Marlon Brando's Oscar from On the Waterfront. His statement: I had no knowledge these gifts were connected to illegal activity. Miranda Kerr returned $8.1 million in jewelry, an 11-carat diamond, emerald earrings, a diamond necklace, gifts from Joe Lowe that she thought came from a legitimate businessman. Real estate was seized and sold. The Park Laurel penthouse in Manhattan, $30 million, sold at auction. The Beverly Hills mansion, $39 million, sold to DJ Khaled, who had no idea about its dark history. A hotel in LA called the Viceroy L'Ermitage, $100 million. Ownership transferred to the U.S. government, then sold. Property in London's Belgravia neighborhood, $80 million, seized by UK authorities. But the most dramatic seizure? The yacht, Equanimity, a $250 million super yacht, 300 feet long, helicopter pad, infinity pool, VIP suites. In February 2018, Indonesian authorities intercepted it off the coast of Bali. In August 2019, it was sold to Genting Malaysia, a casino operator, for $126 million, a $124 million loss. Turns out, nobody wants to pay full price for a kleptocrat's yacht. The art collection was equally impressive. Monet's Saint-Georges Majeur au Crépuscule was recovered from a Swiss vault. A Van Gogh painting, title still undisclosed, was seized in Singapore. And the Basquiat painting Dust Heads that Lowe bought for $35 million, the DOJ sold it at auction for $48.8 million. The U.S. government actually made a profit on that one. Total art recovered, over $200 million. Even The Wolf of Wall Street contributed to the recovery. The DOJ reached a settlement with Red Granite Pictures, $60 million. The film's profits, plus fees, handed over to compensate victims. The movie about fraud, funded by fraud, ended up profitable for the U.S. government. You can't make this up. But here's the sobering reality. An estimated $2 to $3 billion is still missing. Joe Lowe is believed to be living in luxury in Shanghai or Macau, protected by Chinese authorities. Malaysia has no extradition treaty with China. Neither does the United States. China uses Lowe as political leverage. As long as he's useful, he stays free. The money he stole is hidden in shell companies across the Seychelles, the British Virgin Islands, offshore accounts registered to family members. There are rumors, unverified, that Lowe converted some funds to cryptocurrency. If true, it's even harder to trace. The Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission is still tracking money trails. But the reality is this: if money has been laundered through 20-plus countries over 10 years, the odds of full recovery are slim. And what about Goldman Sachs? Let's do the math. Fees earned from 1MDB, $600 million. Total penalties and settlements, $6.8 billion. Net loss, $6.2 billion. But here's the context that matters. Goldman's revenue in 2020, the year of the settlement, $44.6 billion. The $6.8 billion in penalties was spread over multiple years. Goldman remained profitable every single year during the scandal. And executive accountability? No C-suite executives were charged. Lloyd Blankfein retired in 2018. Unrelated timing, supposedly. David Solomon became CEO. Leistner and Eng were charged and convicted. But both were regional bankers, not board members. Goldman's defense has never wavered. Leistner lied to us. We're victims too. But critics ask a simple question. How does a regional chairman bypass billions in compliance controls without anyone at the top noticing? No one from Goldman has answered that question satisfactorily. So what does the 1MDB scandal teach us? First, Wall Street's incentive problem hasn't been fixed. Bankers are still compensated on deal volume, not deal quality. Tim Leistner's estimated bonus from the 1MDB deals, $10 to $20 million. If you can make that in 1 year, why ask questions? The eat what you kill mentality persists. Individual bankers are treated like free agents, not team players. Compliance is seen as an obstacle to deals, not protection from disaster. This isn't new. It's the same incentive structure that caused the 2008 financial crisis with subprime mortgages, the same structure behind Enron in 2001, where auditors had conflicts of interest. And after 1MDB, Goldman's bonus structure remains essentially unchanged. Second, regulatory gaps are being exploited. Sovereign wealth funds face less scrutiny than corporate entities. The assumption is that governments police themselves, but sovereign funds globally manage $12 trillion. And there's minimal international oversight. When money is laundered through 20 countries, each jurisdiction investigates separately, slowly. The complexity creates immunity. Shell company havens still exist. British Virgin Islands, Seychelles, Panama. Minimal disclosure requirements. Maximum secrecy. The solution needed? Real-time international financial intelligence sharing. It doesn't exist. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act allows the U.S. to prosecute bribery of foreign officials, but only if U.S. banks are involved. Route the money through European or Asian banks? Different story. Third, the too-big-to-jail problem persists. After the 2008 financial crisis, no major bank CEOs were prosecuted. After 1MDB, no Goldman executives were charged, despite facilitating a $4.5 billion theft. The Department of Justice weighs collateral damage. If we indict Goldman's CEO, does the bank collapse? Do pension funds get wiped out? Do innocent employees lose jobs? So banks pay fines, promise to do better. Leadership walks away. The incentive this creates is obvious. If the worst-case scenario is paying a fine, why not take the risk? Compare that to individuals. Joe Low faces life in prison if he's ever caught. Najib Razak is serving 12 years. Leisner and Ung are in prison. But institutions, they pay money and continue operating. Goldman Sachs is still one of Wall Street's most prestigious banks. 2023 revenue, $46 billion. The system that made 1MDB possible, it's still intact. So where are they now? Joe Low is believed to be in China, Shanghai, or Macau. An Interpol red notice is active. But he'll likely never face trial. Najib Razak is in Kajang Prison, Malaysia, serving 12 years. Pardon applications have been denied. Tim Leisner is awaiting sentencing. As a cooperating witness, he'll likely get 5 to 10 years, maybe less. Roger Ung is serving 10 years in a U.S. federal prison. Goldman Sachs, still operating, still prestigious, still profitable. 1MDB, the Malaysian government is attempting to restructure it. Most assets have been liquidated to pay debts, and the missing billions, still missing. $2 to $3 billion never recovered. Remember that FBI raid? The Cristal champagne, the Basquiat painting, the Manhattan penthouse? The question we started with was simple. How did a 20-something with no official title convince the smartest people in finance to hand over $6.5 billion? The answer? Because the system wanted to believe. Because the fees were too good to question. Because everyone assumed someone else was checking. But here's the bigger truth. This wasn't a story of a criminal mastermind outsmarting the system. This was the system working exactly as designed. Maximize short-term profit, minimize accountability, let taxpayers and victims clean up the mess. The champagne has stopped flowing, the penthouse is empty, the yacht has been sold. But somewhere in Shanghai, Joe Low is still spending money that was never his to take. And on Wall Street, the bonuses are bigger than ever. The system that made 1MDB possible, it's still open for business.